Yeah.
Yeah,
So I have an older brother and two younger sisters, and we grew up in a very strict Punjabi household where we weren't really allowed to really talk back. We were to be seen but not heard, and it was mostly me and my sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, who did like all the household work. And I studied. I studied like doing cleaning and cooking and washing dishes practically from the age of 7. So we were always like, taught, one has to do the washing dishes, the other one dries. And so we were doing that from the age of 7. And then slowly I like began to like help my mom with onions and chopping like ginger and chilies and things for the curries. And all this like began at a very early age. And then by the time I was 9 or 10, I was kind of like really doing a lot of like the cooking, and the dishes continued right from like the age of 7. So we were just doing household work and cleaning, got put into the equation too. And then it was me and my sister. My brother didn't really have to do any household work. And we were to be, like I said, we were to be seen, but like not heard.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at MsUSATexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Pyx Global at www.hopyxglobal.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of the Ms. Texas Show. My name is Fiona Elizabeth Curley. I'm one of the 2 new co-hosts for the Ms. Texas Show. And today I am joined by an incredible person who is a survivor of forced marriage and honor-based abuse, which she wrote about in her memoir, Forced to Marry Him, A Lifetime of Tradition and the Will to Break It, Miss Davinder Kaur. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You did. You
Okay.
pronounced it perfectly. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
So it's so wonderful to see you, and I know that you were interviewed here previously, and it's so great to see you back here on again. So for anyone who doesn't know, would you like to give like a little bit about yourself, why you're here, what's your journey, your mission?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Fiona. I really appreciate it. And my name's Davinder Kaur, and I'm the author of Forced to Marry Him, A Lifetime of Tradition and the Will to Break It. And my story began in England, where I was born and raised. And so you'd think like forced marriage wouldn't happen to somebody growing up in the UK, but it did happen to me. So my parents moved from the Punjab when they were really young. My mom was about 9, my dad was about 10. And I think my mom, like, she got married when she was about 17. And then I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And so I guess in this segment, I'm going into my whole story. Is that right? Like, you just want me to tell the story, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters, and we grew up in a very strict Punjabi household where we weren't really allowed to really talk back. We were to be seen but not heard. And it was mostly me and my sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, who did like all the household work. And I studied like doing cleaning and cooking and washing dishes practically from the age of 7. So we were always like, taught, one has to do the washing dishes, the other one dries. And so we were doing that from the age of 7. And then slowly I began to help my mom with onions and chopping ginger and chilies and things for the curries. And all this began at a very early age. And then by the time I was 9 or 10, I was kind of really doing a lot of the cooking, and the dishes continued right from the age of 7. So we were just doing household work and cleaning, got put into the equation too. And then it was me and my sister. My brother didn't really have to do any household work. And we were to be, like I said, we were to be seen, but not heard. And so we were raised in such a way, it was very strict. So if, for instance, we didn't do one single thing that my mom had trained us what her expectations were. If we left a dish on the table in the living room, a cup or something, she would say, "What's that cup doing there? Why haven't you moved it? What have I told you about that?" So we would always be aware of that we couldn't leave things around. And at nighttime, all the dishes had to be washed. We didn't use a dishwasher back then, so they'd have to be washed, plus they had to be dried and put away into the cupboard. We couldn't even leave one cup in the sink unwashed, or even on the dish rack just to dry. Everything had to be perfect, and if it wasn't, we would get told off. And if we repeated it, then we would get slapped and punished in some kind of way. And whenever if we did something, let's say she had just told us the day before, but we repeated something the next day, sometimes we would get put in the cellar for small little things, just so she would show us that, you're not listening, this, or if we didn't really answer her back, but let's say she thought that we had said something in such a way that it wasn't respectful, then we would be put in the cellar. And the cellar was a really scary place. I mentioned it in the book. And my mom would switch off the light, and it was just a terrifying place because we had mice running around. So so we were kind of punished, and we knew that my mom had all these expectations from us and what she would do if we didn't conform. So when I was 14 and a man came round to our shop, we had a shop from the age of 9. First we lived in a house, and then when I was about 9 we moved to a shop up the road, on the same road where the house was. But we then we lived above the shop, and we had to help my mom with shop work as well as upstairs cleaning and cooking. And so it was really busy, just busy family life. And my dad wasn't always there. My dad was out most of the time. He wasn't around. So my mom was doing all this work, and we would have to assist with her. And then one day, when this man came around and he showed a picture of a boy to my mom, and I was only 14, my mom, she said, what do you think of this boy? You're really lucky to marry this kind of a boy. He's really good looking, very well educated. What do you think? Do you say yes? And I knew I couldn't really say anything to the contrary of what I really wanted to say. I had been brought up watching Bollywood movies, and in Bollywood movies, we knew that girls had arranged marriages that they couldn't answer back. And then when they did show girls on the movies who said no, they were slapped just similarly as we were in our house. And also I knew that my friends, it was happening to them too. They were all getting into arranged marriages. They had a similar background to myself, where their parents had moved from the Punjab to the UK. And so the same thing happened to them, and they were Punjabi as well. So the same as myself. And they seem to have similar kinds of parents, really strict parents. And so it's really odd, but there's so many girls in Bradford where there's a lot of Indians and Pakistanis, and they had the same, similar background to me, and the same thing was happening to them. They would get into these arranged marriages too at the age of 14. And so if I had answered back, my mom would have said, who do you think you are? Your friend's getting married to the boy from India. What's so special about you? What makes you so different? So I knew I couldn't say anything. I knew it was happening to them too, and that their parents had found boys as well, whether they were Indian boys from England, but mostly it was Indian boys from India. And so, and from what I've seen on Bollywood movies, and from what I knew that was happening around me, I knew this was my culture. that we were expected to, have an arranged marriage, and we listened to what our parents said, and we couldn't like defy them. And I already knew this from just the way I was raised. So I just basically had to like really go along with it. And I just said, he's okay. But I didn't really know what I was getting into, really. Like, I knew that maybe this is like somebody that my mom's looking at for me, but I didn't really realize, I don't think it really hit me. And plus I was only 14, that this is a man I'm going to marry. And once I say yes, I'm locked into it. Like, I didn't know like the whole, the whole seriousness of the situation, or else if I had, maybe I could have said, can I think about it? But I didn't have that option. So before I knew it, I was like engaged. And the man who had brought the picture, he was like the middleman. He was like somebody like a matchmaker. And so he had come around to our house before, and I think he had his eyes set on me because he saw that I knew how to do everything, around the house. I knew how to I'd bring him cups of tea because my mom trained me to do it that way, so that a guest wouldn't be waiting. You would say, what can I get you? Can I get you some tea? Can I get you some biscuits? Can I get you some samosas? And so the way I had to serve him was the way I was trained. And I think he liked that. So he had said to my mom, I'm going to find her husband. And this is what people did. They would like to tell people's parents, I'm going to look for somebody for her. There was always a matchmaker, and the matchmaker gets something out of a deal as well. Whether it's, clothes or some kind of cash or jewelry, for their family. There's like some kinds of exchanges going on. So it's, benefits them too. And so he had already wanted to find somebody for me. And so when he came around and showed that picture, I mean, obviously he was very happy because this is someone he knew from the Punjab back in India. And a couple of weeks later, the boy was already brought over to England, and we were sent to my uncle's house. And I was told, my whole family was there, my uncles, aunties, my grandma, my cousins, and it was like a party. And I was told how to behave. My mom told me, you just basically say hello to him. You're not supposed to look at him. You're not really supposed to talk to him. Just look at the camera and smile. So I was told what to do, what I couldn't do. And again, everyone seemed to be happy, and I just did what I was told to do, but I barely said hello to him and looked at him in the very beginning. And we had to pose for pictures. He put his arm around my shoulders, and his brother, who lives in Birmingham, came with his wife, and they also were in the picture, putting their arms around my shoulders as though we were one happy family posing for the camera. Yet I didn't really know them. They were strangers to that day. That was the first day I saw them, the first day I saw him. And yet we were posing for pictures, and I didn't realize it at the time. But that was my engagement party. It only dawned upon me later. Nobody said, this is your engagement. I just thought it was something I was going through. I don't think it really hit me what was happening. But that was my engagement. And then the boy was in Birmingham, where his brother lived, for a couple of weeks. And then he went back to India. And then the following year, we went to India on holiday, but I didn't realize again that it was to meet the boy's family, the rest of his family. I was told it was just a holiday, vacation. And so, we didn't want to go to India, my brother and my sisters and myself. We wanted to go Spain or Italy or France, where all our other friends were going for the 6 weeks summer holiday from school. And we were wondering why we had to go to India for. We'd never been there before. And we didn't really get a choice. And in the beginning, I did not like India. It was very, very different. And, I soon realized what the trip was for, because we went to his village and his whole family was there. And same thing happened again. I mean, I had to pose for pictures with his parents who hadn't come to England the first time. And so I had, I only got to meet them, this time when I was 15, and the rest of his family. And again, I was posing for pictures and smiling for the camera. And again, I didn't realize that was a never engagement party till years later, when I was thinking about the whole thing. And also my mom was she took us to India really to buy jewelry and clothes, for my upcoming wedding. And so I didn't think too much about it. Again, it's my mom's, choice to do whatever she thinks she has to do. And I just thought, okay, whatever my mom chooses to do. But I don't think I was like thinking at the time that, oh, she just did this on purpose. She wants to, have me meet her, his parents. I just did like what my mom said. But like later on when I analyzed it, I realized like this trip was not a holiday. It was like a business trip, the business of arranged marriage. It was just to find things for my wedding and to arrange the wedding properly and to meet his family. And so when I thought about it later, it does make me upset that I feel like, I could have been told all this, but it was just something my mom planned and my mom did everything. And I was like, nobody that had to be consulted, yet it was my wedding. And anyway, when we returned back to England, a little bit after that, we moved to Hull, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away. And Hull was very different to Bradford. There's not as many Indians and Pakistanis, Asian people there. It was completely different. And we had a bigger shop and we lived above the shop again. And then as the years went by, and I got closer to the age of 18, I knew I didn't want to marry. And just backtracking a little bit, I also had wanted to go to college. And I went on an interview to the college with one of my friends from high school from Bradford. And I found out a little bit afterwards that I had got accepted into that college, Park Lane College in Leeds. And when I told my mom I was accepted, my mom wouldn't let me go because it would mean going on a train every day to Leeds from Hull. And that wasn't like something acceptable for my mom. I would be away from her like scrutiny. And she didn't want me to do that. She didn't want me to live on campus. So she said, you don't need to go to college. You're getting married when you're 18. So she denied my rights to a further education. I had got accepted into college. It's something I wanted to do and I wasn't allowed to. So I actually found, a government youth training scheme where they teach you how to get skills for a job. And so I was put into a secretarial college where I only got like a very, very little money, like £25 per week or something like that. And it's a 1-year training scheme. And I started that like when I was 17, I believe, or 16 and a half to 17 and a half. And I did that in Hull. And as I was doing that, I realized that I didn't want to get married to this boy as time got closer to my being 18. And I knew I would get married when I was 18. I knew I didn't want to. And I think then I was maturing and getting to know more of my mind, because I was growing and probably realizing more from watching television and seeing things around me. And plus I would read Mills and Boon books, romance books, in the evening. After I had done all the chores and my homework and everything, I would sit in bed and sometimes I couldn't put the book down. And I realized like, that's what I wanted. I wanted like romance, like what was happening to the women in the book. And, they would date and they would be entranced by the guy that they would meet, the tall, dark, handsome guy. And I kind of wanted all that. And I realized that wasn't going to happen to me, that my marriage was arranged and this was a stranger. Like I had only met him 2 times and barely spoken 10 words to him. There's a couple of phone calls that my mom made me talk to him. But again, like I couldn't speak any Punjabi. Well, I did speak Punjabi, but not fluently. And he didn't speak any English. So there was some kind of communication barrier there because I was very self-conscious speaking Punjabi and I wasn't fluent and I didn't want to speak it. And I wasn't excited like when I had to call and when he was on the phone, and I would quickly like say, I'm putting my mom back on the phone because I didn't want to talk to him. So we didn't really talk a lot. And I would quickly like just pass it to my mom. So I really barely spoke, like literally 10 to 20 words or something to him. It wasn't much at all. And I had only seen him 2 times. And so as I got closer to the age of 18, I was in this YTS program, like I told you, the youth training scheme, learning secretarial work, typing and stuff like that. And I had work placements, 2 placements. And I realized I didn't want to get married. And then I formulated a plan that I would wait till I was 18 and I would run away. I'm not going to let this marriage happen. And so that's what I did. I devised a plan where I would get away. And so after my 18th birthday, I knew it was London. I don't know how. I had never been to London before. I didn't know anybody there. I had some money saved up from the youth training scheme and also from this job that I had done from home for a restaurant owner making samosas. Since we had a shop, we used to have people come in and they would see that we made some Indian food that we were selling. And I got orders of samosas, which my mom knew I could make because she trained me how to make them. And after school, I would make all these samosas and my mom would let me keep the money. So I saved some money up from the youth training scheme and from making samosas. And so I had about £5,000. And anyway, I booked a coach ticket, like a bus ticket, and London was 5 hours away. I had some money. And the day came when it was the day I chose to run away, and I had a taxi booked, and I had told the taxi when I was in the town center and I told them, I said, please, park here. Don't come into my shop, because if my dad knows I'm taking a taxi, it's going to be, I don't want him to know. So I gave him instructions, and then they pulled up that day and my heart was racing as I came down the stairs with my big bag. And I was so scared, and I managed to get into the taxi, and they took me to the town center, and I got into the bus to London, and my heart was just racing, and I was so scared. And I thought, oh my gosh, what if my dad knows I've gone? What if they're looking for me? What if they're following this bus? And I was in a panic, and my eyes were just tears were flowing, and I was feeling really bad as a bus was pulling away. And this whole 5-hour journey, I was terrified because I didn't know where I was going to go. I was scared that I had done this. I was scared of being caught. I was scared that my parents were behind the bus and all kinds of things. And I was so scared. And when I got to London, I found a cheap bed and breakfast where I stayed for a couple of weeks till I found a room in a house that I paid a little bit of money for, but it was fairly inexpensive. And I took some odd jobs, and but I got homesick. And one day I made a call, which I probably shouldn't have done. And it was 2 months after being in London, and I was tricked into going back home because they told me my grandma was sick, and I was really close to my grandma, and so I thought it was because of me. And when I finally agreed to go back home, my grandma was fine. There's nothing wrong with her. And it was all a trick to just get me back home. And then before I knew it, they put all this guilt upon me. My mom did, about the marriage, that he'd been waiting for me. How can I do this now? How can I break off the engagement? His brother loves me. His sister-in-law loves me. The boy's been waiting for all these years, but I didn't make him wait for me. My parents made him wait for me. And now I was trapped. And even though I was 18, I was still trapped. So this is what I need to let people know, that forced marriage can happen at any age, not just when you're 13, 14. It can happen at 18. It can happen at 21, 22, and it's still wrong. Nobody has a right to force you. And just because you're an adult doesn't mean you can't get forced just because you're an adult. Because all this guilt was put upon me, and they put pressure upon me and told me that, I can't do this to them. I can't do this to him. I can't do this to his brother. And what are they going to say to everybody? And then, when you have this kind of guilt put upon you, there's only so much you can take. And so I had run away once and got away with running away, but now their eyes were upon me, and they, I knew I couldn't run away again. And so I had to give in. And then the man who had arranged our wedding, the matchmaker, knew that the boy couldn't come back to England again, because the first time when he came, he was able to visit, but on a subsequent visit, the immigration might be very suspicious, because they were back then, a lot of these arranged marriages, they knew what was happening and they didn't like this, they frowned upon it. And so they would question people and say, do you know this person? Have you been dating them? And if they found out otherwise, they could deny entry. So the matchmaker was very smart, and he knew that he couldn't come back to England, the boy. And so his daughter lived in Denmark. And so he arranged that he would go to Denmark and he would say that he's never been to Europe before and he wants to visit Denmark and Sweden and Norway and, some other parts of Europe. And it worked, that's what he did. And he was able to get a visa to enter Europe without any problem. And I was sent to Denmark because I gave in to the guilt and the pressure put upon me. There's nothing I could do. And I knew that to try and get away from my whole family, which I have a very big family, and if I tried to get away from them, I have so many eyes looking at me now because I ran away once, and I'm not going to be successful there in Hull where everybody's watching me. But in Denmark, I only have to get away from one person, from him, the guy that I'm going to marry. And I know now I should never have done it, but at age 18, I didn't know. I thought it made sense that I do this, I didn't want to get married to him, but I knew I would get divorced from him as soon as my family all left. And it sounds really stupid now, and I wish I had known it then, but I didn't know as a 18-year-old that this wasn't the right thing to do, and it's a scary thing to do. And so I went to Denmark, and cut a long story short, I was not happy on my wedding day. I was very miserable, but nobody cared, just as long as I did what they wanted me to do. And my family all flew out to Denmark from England, and and I was miserable, and I blacked out lots of things. And we went on honeymoon to Rome and Venice, and and then I wrote like the rest of it, like in my book. But there was a day shortly after returning back from the honeymoon when I told him that I didn't want to stay married to him. I wanted a divorce. I told him within 2 weeks, and he was really very upset with me, and he called my family behind my back. And then my dad came to Denmark 6 weeks later. I didn't know he was going to come, and I found out too late. And then my dad was trying to get me to stay in this marriage, and I said no, I don't want to. I have nothing in common with him. And my husband was controlling too, which I also didn't like. That he would tell me I couldn't talk to men on a bus on my way to work and ask for directions. I had to talk to women. I couldn't wear makeup, when my mom had said, as soon as I get married, like I never wore makeup when I was, young, because they said you can't wear makeup. You have to wait till you're married. So then I waited till I was married. And then he used to say to me, why are you wearing makeup for, when I would go to work? Because I got a job because, after living like with the matchmaker's daughter, we had to move out like as soon as we were married, have our own place, and then I had to pay rent. And so I had to have a job, and I found a job in a fast food restaurant. And when I would go there, and he would work for the matchmaker's family who had a shop, and he would work there, and I would work for this fast food restaurant. But he wasn't happy if I was wearing makeup on my, to go to my job. And he would say, you don't have to wear makeup. And so I was like really confused, because my mom said you can wear it when you get married. He said no, and he was controlling, and I didn't want to be married to someone like him. Plus we had nothing in common, and there was a language barrier, and I didn't feel any chemistry. So I told him I didn't want to be with him. And then my dad tried to persuade me, and I said no. And then my dad went off to a bar with him, and then my dad went drinking because that's what he did. And my husband came back, and he nearly killed me that night because he was drunk, and he attacked me. And you could read about it in the book, but like my life was nearly ended that night. And when my dad came back, and I told my dad what he had done, that my husband had raped me and was strangling me, my dad said he had every right to do that to you. He's your husband. My own dad didn't even help me. And I was in Denmark alone without family. My dad, when I pleaded for help from him, he basically said he has every right, but they gave him that right. They made him my husband. I didn't choose him as my husband. And so, I managed to get away. That night, I got away from them. Again, for the second time, I ran away, and my heart was pounding again. And I mentioned it in the book, so I won't talk about all of it right now. But what I just want it to be known is that, parents do this. They force their children into these marriages, and it's not right. because number one, I was born in the UK and I was brought up in a different way, westernized. I saw, different kinds of music, different kinds of programs, my friends around me at school, just seeing them. And, I grew up westernized. So I grew up in England, and they expect you to kind of like behave as though you grew up in India. And it's very difficult, like they have a struggle. They move to a different country, but they try to hold on to memories from back there. And maybe it's their parents, like my grandparents, who are also like encouraging them to do certain things, to hold on to traditions. Some traditions don't work. And then if you move to a different country, you need to adapt. You can't hold on to these old ideas, especially when your children are growing up in different places. So it's, I just want people to know that, they have rights. And, if your parents take you to a different country, you have a right to say no. I thought at that time I didn't have a right. There was no charities out there, no organizations out there to help victims of forced marriage or child marriage. And now there's quite a few in the UK, and there's a couple here in the US, but not as many in the UK. It seems like the UK is like 100 steps ahead of America as far as like helping victims of forced marriage and child marriage, and the awareness that's there. It's not at the same level here, but there is, some organizations, especially Unchained at Last on the East Coast, that is helping like victims of forced marriage and child marriage. I wish I had that when I was growing up, and I didn't. I had like no one to call, no one to help me. And so what I just want it to be known is that no one has to say yes to their parents, and it's hard for kids. Kids will say yes because they're going to think their parents have their best interests at heart, just like I did. And I think more awareness and education has to be spread about this. Teachers need to be talking about this at schools here in America, in the UK, educating kids that, you have a right to marry who you want to, when you want to. And if your parents are trying to put you into an arranged marriage, you don't have to. This is a number you can call. Okay, maybe that didn't exist when I was growing up, but it exists now. And so I feel like that education needs to be put out there. And so I wrote my book also to spread awareness. So people hopefully who can read my story, if they're going through this themselves, because it still happens, people are still getting forced into these arranged marriages, and child marriage is happening here in the US as well as everywhere in the world. Shouldn't be happening here. I mean, just think about it. America, such a modern country, who could believe that child marriage is happening here? But it is. I mean, girls can be married here, and boys too, at the age of 13, 14, if a parent signs off on the consent, that they consent to the marriage, and the judge sees that, the judge will sign off thinking the parents have the best interests of that child, and the judge is complicit also in the abuse of that child. And so, we have to like speak up about this. And so that's why I wrote my book, and that's why I speak up now about this, because it shouldn't have happened to me, and it shouldn't happen to anybody, and it's still happening.
Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely wonderful. Everything that what you're doing and what you're talking about, just absolutely wonderful. And I appreciate everything you're doing. From, where I come from, as someone who went through the family court system in the United States, I understand, at least from a legal aspect, how so many of within like our system of government, in the US and in the UK, how there are kind of these legal shortcuts that a lot of these people go through to try and avoid, like, the police, to try and evade, like, I know that you mentioned you had to go to another part of Europe, probably evading, airport security. Probably no one was able to ask you, where are you going? What are you doing? I definitely think that, actually, do you think that, in a sense, is there some sort of complicity that the courts might have in this process, in this forced marriage concept? Do you think like judges or lawyers, is there like some complicity at hand in this system?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they should be aware that this is not in the best interests of the child. And, what human being would do this to a child, marry them off at 14 or 15. I mean, this is a human rights abuse. No child should be married. They don't need to be married until they're 18. And if you ask me, I would even say it's better to marry someone off at 21, not 18. 18 is still too young. I was married at 18 and I don't think I was ready. The day before, when you're 17, you're still kind of like technically a child. What makes you an adult the next day as soon as you turn 18? It doesn't make you an adult. And so it's wrong. I feel there's a lot of people who are not ready at 18. And so it's a start to raise the marriage age to 18, but I really feel it should be 21, but I'll go with 18. It's much better than like letting a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old get married. That's like way too young, and it's wrong. It's a human rights abuse. And yes, judges are complicit in the abuse of that child when they're signing off thinking that the parents have the best interest, so they will also sign off. They need to also be educated, and I'm shocked that they would sign off on this. The laws need to change so that doesn't happen. Judges wouldn't sign off. Laws just need to be changed, and only 10 states so far have raised the marriage age to 18, and so we need to do so much better than that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm turning 18 this month, and I don't see myself getting, married soon in the future. So I agree
Good,
with
yeah,
you.
because you've got your whole life ahead of you, and it
I
doesn't need to
think,
happen until you're
yes.
25 or 26.
Yeah, yes, I understand what you're saying with 21. I agree with that. So thank you so much, Ms. Kaur, for everything that you're doing. And I'd just like to one last thing. What would you say to the young girls and boys going through this, experiencing this, in their own culture? Because I know it's not just in India. I know it's in Europe, in South America, in Africa, all over the world, that this concept of honor-based abuse and forced marriage is going on. What would you say to them? Do you have any advice that you would give to these young people that are experiencing this?
Yeah, I would just say, you have rights, and there's organizations out there that can help you, whether it's, to give you shelter, to give you, some other kind of like assistance. Just know who you can contact. I mean, in the UK, there's Karma Nirvana, and here in the USA, it's Unchained at Last. And then there's other organizations too, but like, just find out like who there is there to help you. And if your parents are doing this to you, just know that you have that right. And it's not right. It's not something that you have to go along with. You have a right to say no, and just reach out to someone for help who can assist you. Don't go through this, because this will destroy your life.
Mm. Okay, so thank you so much, Ms. Kaur. And to everyone watching, you were watching the TheMsTexas Show. Our guest today has been Ms. Davinder Kaur, the author of Forced to Marry Him, A Lifetime of Tradition and the Will to Break It. And thank you everyone for listening.